Can you date in a way that divorce-proofs your future relationship? Is it possible? And if so, how do you do it? I'm Alana Mackenzie Page. I'm a dating coach and author of the best-selling book, The Art of Feminine Seduction, and I love nuance. And there's a lot of nuance in this question of dating to divorce-proof your future relationship. So I am happy to dive in with you today about this. The first thing I want to say about this, we're going to answer the question, is it possible? Is it possible to divorce-proof your future relationship through your dating process? And the answer I have to this is no. And then the slightly longer answer to this is yes, it is, if you know what you're doing. So we're going to talk in this video about what it means to know what you're doing if you are trying to divorce-proof your future relationship, or just date for really long-term commitment where you're not getting abandoned. And then we'll talk a little bit about why no at the end, because that's kind of a less exciting part, but it bears talking about. The first thing to know is that you want to be most aware of emotional intelligence when you're dating. The research is out there. Like, the research on long-term relationships is in. We are understanding more and more about what makes long-term relationships viable. It's not really a question as much anymore. There's very strong, clear research about what makes a relationship work long-term, and most of it has to do with emotional intimacy, which comes down to your level of emotional intelligence. And where I recommend you begin with this is your own emotional intelligence, because when you work with your own emotional intelligence, you just naturally start attracting people with higher emotional intelligence, because you no longer accept people who don't have that. You just stop being interested in the drama and meanness, I can even say just meanness of people who aren't dating with this self-awareness of emotional intelligence, and you kind of phase them out because they're no longer of interest to you in the way that you are in the world once you've up-leveled your skills in emotional intelligence. This is essentially what I teach people to do as a dating coach. I teach them to use emotional tools, up-level their own somatic experience of dating so that they are comfortable having healthy relationships, so that having a healthy, great, connected, intimate, passionate, exciting, long-term, viably long-term relationship is just the norm. Like, it just is the only possible natural outcome of being in relationship for them, of the dating process and getting into a relationship. So that's really what it's all about. How do you do that? Let's talk about how you make that happen. The most important thing is to become aware. It's really an awareness practice, and especially a self-awareness practice, because most of us are doing things we're not even aware of. And I'm the same way. Nobody gets out of this. This is a human thing, that we're not aware of everything that we're doing and thinking and feeling all the time. We don't have the brains, our brains aren't designed for that. So you have to become aware of the ways that you're showing up in relationship, or in this case, specifically in dating, and how you want to shift your own behavior is away from the things that lead to divorce. The Gottmans have identified the 4 horsemen of divorce. So these are the 4 things that lead to divorce all the time when they start showing up in relationships. And the number one thing to be aware of is contempt. This is the number one thing that shows up that leads to divorce. It's just the strongest, most powerful indicator of divorce being imminent. And it is contempt. What's contempt mean? You can think of contempt as being kind of an eye roll. So when you have an eye roll response to another person, that's contempt, right? It's when you don't even take them seriously enough to consider their humanity, or their feelings, their emotions, or their needs and wants. I think it should be pretty obvious why that's awful to experience in a relationship. And people are often doing this in dating already. So if you can notice your own behavior, you may have noticed that you felt some contempt for people you saw on a dating app, for example. And what I recommend to get into the practice of divorce-proofing your future relationship is to start noticing this contempt in yourself and to begin healing it. Because really what it's a sign of is a stuck and a pain point in yourself. And so if you can identify it in yourself and begin to date from a place without contempt, you are much less likely to accept it from another person, because you'll notice it in yourself, which means that you're then going to notice it in another person, and you will be much less attracted to them because you will notice that they are not a person who is as viable for a long-term relationship. The second thing to notice is criticism. So criticism is, I think, self-explanatory. Maybe let's talk about it a second. It's calling names, right? It's telling someone they're doing something wrong. It's criticizing something they do or who they are. Again, I think this is, sort of obviously painful, but this is a very tricky road to tread. When we get into relating to people, we often, especially even as well-intentioned people, we often think we're giving feedback or we're helping them understand more about us. And yet the way that we're speaking is criticism, and it's being received by the other person as criticism. And it's very painful to be on the receiving end of criticism, or what usually comes after criticism, which is the next horseman of divorce, and that's defensiveness. So you want to be aware of when you are potentially criticizing someone, so that you can then be aware of when someone is criticizing you. And again, if it comes up in the early phases of dating, probably avoid that person. That person doesn't have enough emotional intelligence to really make it in the long term with you. You want to be aware of these patterns that people bring to relationships really early. And so criticism is the other one to be on the lookout for. Then there's defensiveness. Defensiveness is the third horseman of divorce. Defensiveness is usually a response to criticism. So it's usually when someone feels they've been attacked. Even if you didn't intend to attack them, they feel attacked, and then they defend themselves instead of listening to what you have to say and responding to it. So oftentimes this looks like if you say, I thought you were going to pick me up at this time. And then someone goes, well, you should have texted me, right? It's there's a kind of a throwing it back in your face. Something in the relationship, there's a miscommunication, and then they're going to just throw it back in your face that you should have done something differently, right? It's like, I don't take responsibility for that. That's on you. And of course, we can get defensive as well. I don't mean to say that this is just something that the other person might do. You may also experience some defensiveness arising for you in dating. And so I recommend being on the lookout for that in yourself whenever you feel like you need to defend yourself, right? That's the key, is whenever you are feeling like you've been attacked, you've been wronged, and then you need to defend yourself. And that's a hard place to become curious. I can say from personal experience, that's a really hard place to become curious instead of defensive, really. To really wonder what's going on for the other person and what's going on for yourself, and allow those kind of emotions to exist, even though the instinct that we often have is to defend ourselves and our righteousness and our rightness and our truth. The practice is to get really relational at these moments and to begin to practice that kind of relating that is emotional and curious rather than defensive. Then again, if you are dating someone, the early stages of dating, and you find that they are often defensive, they are likely not a great partner for the long term, unless they are really, really available for doing the work, unless they are really going to go to therapy or going to work through things with you, really committed to that. It's going to be very difficult to create a long-term life with that person. So again, look for it in yourself, begin to work on it in yourself, and then hopefully don't agree to long-term relationships with people who have that pattern. And the last one, the fourth horseman of divorce, is stonewalling. And stonewalling is often a response to contempt. It's often a response to someone not having their needs met, right? Someone being met with the eye roll and the kind of like, oh God, I don't even care about what's going on for you. Stonewalling is where people shut down. and they withdraw and they just won't even engage with you, right? So you can ask a question, they don't answer. You send a text, they're gone, right? That's the kind of thing that you want to just immediately let go of. That's not a great person to be in a long-term relationship with. Someone with that pattern is going to be really hard to communicate with when things get hard, because things often do get hard at some point, and you want to be with someone who is willing to engage with you at that moment. So be on the lookout again for people who just disappear, or who don't answer your questions, or who seem to willingly ignore your questions or your concerns. Let those people go early. Don't waste your time building a relationship with those people, because unless there's a caveat, I love the nuance, unless they're really willing to work on that with you and move through their pattern of stonewalling. This is, if they are super personal growth oriented, that's a good sign. And if they're not, save your future heartbreak, and don't engage with them in a long-term way. If you're enjoying a short-term thing with them, that's fine. But for a long-term divorce-proof relationship or commitment relationship, they are likely not a great candidate to make things work in the long run. Another thing I want to talk about is also a Gottman thing, and it's bids. And this is the other number one predictor of successful relationships, is this topic of bids. And bids are just when someone requests attention, essentially, when someone makes a comment where they are interested in your feedback, and the other person, and you respond. I guess I'm giving a metaphor about you. So you, for example, might tell them, like, hey, I saw in the paper it's going to get into the 80s today. Just mentioning something interesting that you perceived or whatever. And it doesn't even have to be that interesting, as you can tell from the weather example. And they respond positively. So your partner responds positively. They say something like, oh yeah, are we going to go for a walk? Or something like that. Could literally anything. The idea is just that the other person responds positively to whatever you put out there. And they found that people who have mostly positive interactions like this, like very simple, doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just very simple, lovely interactions with each other, are more likely to stay together. So you can begin testing your connections, your dating connections, with this idea. Literally just wondering about what kind of attention they're going to give you. Are they going to give you positive attention when you bring up something? You can share about, like, oh my gosh, look at that painting in the restaurant. That's beautiful, right? Just anything that comes to mind for you. And the way that they respond to you should be positive. That is a great sign. So if your goal is to divorce-proof your future relationship in the dating phase already, what I recommend is that you begin looking at that self-awareness piece and how you are showing up whenever you're in contempt or criticism or defensiveness or stonewalling, and to begin to notice any of those patterns in yourself at any point in the dating, right? We talked again, if you feel like you need to criticize someone's dating profile, or you feel contempt for them, even if you haven't even met them, or you just want to you want to ghost someone, is a way we can think about that too, right? Stonewalling is you just want to disappear. Or in defensiveness, you feel a need to defend yourself, your life choices, who you are, anything like that. So getting really connected to when those patterns show up in yourself is going to help you notice them in other people, and then decide those people aren't a great fit for a long-term partnership. If they have too many, these are red flags. The other thing you can do is begin practicing those bids in the early phases of dating. You don't have to wait till you're already in a committed relationship to begin practicing bids right now and finding out how someone responds to you. Then let's talk about why you cannot divorce-proof your relationship. This is the nuance, we can say. So unfortunately, there aren't guarantees in life. That is just one of the sad realities of relationships. There are unforeseen things happen, huge grief, sickness, really difficult things that no one foresaw coming. Cheating is another one of these things. And it can really destroy the basis of a relationship in a way that you cannot control. It's not within your control. So you do get to choose how you respond to the situation, again, with your own emotional intelligence, but you cannot control another person. And in fact, you do not want to in a healthy relationship. And so you can only do your best, become your best person. This is why I work with people to become what I call sovereign in their power in relationship, to really be relating to people on a very deep, emotionally intimate level and getting connection, creating connection over and over and over again with their partner. So first we train how to do that in dating, so you feel really comfortable doing that in dating. And then you want to continue to do that with your partner throughout the years, right? Forever, forever and ever. Yet it is not possible to say you will never, ever, ever, guaranteed to never, ever get a divorce, because a marriage is between two people, at least. These days, marriages are even between more than two people. But for the purposes of the dating technique, I teach between two people. So two people have to be in agreement on the commitment to the relationship. And there are no guarantees that that will remain so forever. So you can date in a way that will drastically decrease the chances of divorce, but you cannot completely divorce-proof, 100% divorce-proof your future relationship, because you cannot predict what is going to happen for the rest of your life. If this was helpful, leave a comment, like and subscribe. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about this and whether you are dating in a divorce-proof way. And please reach out if you need support in developing any of these skills or awarenesses in yourself so that you can be dating and divorce-proofing your future relationship. I'll see you next week.